Hey, what's up guys, Tanmaya for Simple Snippets, and this is the part 2 of the web development series and where we designed the login and registration page using PHP, MySQL, HTML5 and CSS3. So in the part 1 of this video tutorial, we dealt with the designing part wherein we designed the 3 pages, that is the login page, the registration page and the home page. So let me just show you 3 different pages that we designed, and if you have missed that video tutorial, you can check it out in the link because this is the continuation of that video tutorial. So this is the login page that we designed in the previous video tutorial. This is the registration page which had one extra field, that is confirm password, and then we had a home page with a logout button. So these are 3 pages that we designed. They are actually not working yet because we still have to add the PHP scripting and we have to create the database. So let's get started with that part. So first we need to create a database with a table which would store the username and password of the users. So in order to do that, quickly go ahead in your XAMPP control panel and start these 2 services, that is Apache and MySQL. So Apache is the basic server that is created on your localhost by this XAMPP software, and MySQL is the database which is provided by this software. So once you start this, you'll see a green highlighting and you'll get a message that it started successfully, and you'll see the port 3306. So after you do this, you have to go ahead in your browser and type in localhost/php myadmin. Once you type this, press enter and it will give you an interface which would connect you to the online database that is provided by the XAMPP server. So here you see an interface and these are the different databases, that is login DB, MySQL DB. So these are the databases that I've previously created. So go ahead and click on new, type in the database name over here. So I'll say sample login DB and click on create. So a new database is added, sample login DB. Click on that. So currently there are no tables in the database, so let's add a table, and the table name we'll say user info table, and we just need actually 2 columns. So we'll keep it simple this time with username and password. So type in 2 and click go. So since you have a GUI, you actually don't have to type in the queries. So here are the column names. So I'll say username and I'll keep the type as varchar and the length as 200, and this field will be password, again varchar, and the length would be 200 again. So here we won't be declaring any primary key and we'll try to keep this simple, but we'll implement the primary key kind of mechanism in the PHP coding, wherein if there is a username already existing, then you cannot create the same username. So I'll show you how to do that in coding part. So quickly click on save and your database is created. So here are the table. Okay, so the table name was saved as user, so it was not user info table. I guess I typed it improperly. Now that we have created the table and database, let's go ahead to the Notepad++ and start with the coding. So we'll first start with the registration page because initially there won't be any user in the database, right? So we'll start with the register.php page. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to establish a connection with the online database or the database that is there on your localhost. So in order to do that, we'll have to create a file, that is dbconfig.php. So what you can do is quickly go in your project code directory, that is sample login page, which is inside the htdocs, and create a new folder named dbconfig. Now go to Notepad++ and create a new file, and this is a PHP file. So it would start from and end from this tag, that is PHP tag. Go ahead and save this as config, and it should be inside the dbconfig folder. And since it is a PHP file, you can select the PHP extension and save it. So there are a few initial settings that we need to code for establishing the connection with the database. So I'll show you what exactly they are. So we are going to use the MySQL connect function, which is basically the function used to establish a connection with the MySQL database. So it is provided by the system itself and you don't have to code that function, you just have to use it. So the way we go ahead and use it is we'll say $con, and this is how we declare variables starting with $sign. So con is a variable equal to MySQL _connect, and inside the parentheses we have to give 3 different parameters. The first parameter is the address of the database. So since the XAMPP server is running on your local host and you don't have to actually give a IP address, or you don't actually have to give a domain address because the database server is running on your PC itself. So you just have to type in localhost. The second parameter is the username, and in this case the username is root because we have admin access to the database, and the password is going to be blank because root doesn't have any password. And if there is any issue in the connection, you can say or die So if there is any issue in the connection, it would print the message unable to connect. So this is the syntax for connection, establishing a connection. And the next line is we need to select the database that we just created. So if you can see in the program, we created a database named sample login db. So the function to select that is MySQL select db, and the two parameters to be passed is the database name, that is sample login db. The second parameter is the connection object or connection variable that we just created. So that's it. So these are the two lines required to establish a connection with the database, and we are going to be needing these files every time we need to check values in the database. So that is why I created a separate file named config.php. Now we can include this file in all of the register or login or home page using the include function. So I'll show you what exactly it is in a while. So now we have created the basic connectivity, and we'll start with the registration page because initially there won't be any values. So this is our registration page, and when we click on sign up, the form will be submitted onto the server, that is your localhost. So that is where the PHP code comes into picture because it is server-side programming language. So when we click, as you can see, it refreshed, and the reason why it went on to index.php is because probably we have given the action as index.php. So that is the reason why it went to the index.php file, but we want the page to be submitted on the same page. So I'll say register.php. So now if I click on sign up, it will stay on the same page, but as you can see, it was submitted to the server because there was a refresh icon over here. But since we have no PHP code written in the backend, there is no processing happening. So what we have to do is we have to take the username, we have to take the password, and we have to check it with the confirm password. And if these two values match, then we have to go ahead and check in the database if there is a same username person already existing. And if there is already a username existing in the database, we have to show him a message that the username exists, try another username. Or if it does not exist, then we have to add these values in the database and create a new user. So these are the things we need to do in the programming part. So let's get started with that part. So since register.php is a PHP file which has HTML, we can embed PHP code inside it. So as you can see, I have already opened and closed the PHP tag inside which we are going to write the PHP code. So the first line of code that we need to do is we need to establish the connection. So that is the reason why we created the config.php file. And in order to include the code inside the config.php file, we have to type in a function that is require, and we have to type in the location of the file. So the config.php file is inside the db config folder. So this is the first line. Okay, so now let's see the form attribute. So I gave this form a class of my form. I gave the action as register.php. So whenever I click the submit button, the PHP script on this form itself is going to get executed. That is the reason why I gave it action of the same file name. And the method is post. Now there are two different ways wherein we can send the data from the front end to the server side. And the two methods are post and get. So if you use the get method, the data that is going to be sent to the server is visible in this address bar. Okay, so the order of the parameters is changed. So the first parameter is the connection object, and the second parameter is the name of the database. So I by mistakenly swapped the order. That is the reason why we got this warning. Okay, so let me just refresh this. Okay, now the warning is gone. So we'll be using the post method because in post method the data is not shown in the URL. And because we are going to send the username and password which are confidential, we don't want the password to be visible in the URL. So that is the reason why we are using the post method. So once we click the submit button, that is the sign up button, we want the data to be posted on this page itself. So now we have to write the PHP code to handle the data that is posted back onto the server. So what we can do is we have to give names to these input buttons. So I'll say name is equal to submit. I'll give name to confirm password as cpassword. I'll give name to the password text box as password, and the username text box I'll give the name as username. Now the reason I gave all these text box and buttons a name attribute is because in order to reference these in the PHP code, we have to use this attribute. So when I click on the submit button is set. So in order to check whether the submit button is clicked, we have to type in if, and we have a inbuilt function that is set, and inside the circular brackets we have to type in the name of the button, and we have to do that using the $_post variable, and the name of the button is submit btn. Now you must be wondering, what is this $_post? So $_post is a global variable which is pre-declared, or it is inbuilt in PHP language. So whenever you post some data from the front end to the server, you can access that using the $_post variable and the name of the attribute that was posted. So we use when we click the submit button, you can reference it inside the PHP code using the $_post, and inside the square brackets, basically it is an array. So inside the square brackets, I give the name of the submit button to reference that button value. So isSet will check whether the button is clicked or not. So if it is clicked, let's see, we try to post an alert box. So in order to post or print something, we have to use the echo function, and inside the single quotes, I will try to push a pop-up. So print a pop-up, we have a code which has to be written in script tag. So it is script type would be text/CSS JavaScript. Since alert function is a JavaScript function, then I'll say alert, and inside double quotes I'll say submit button clicked, or I'll say sign up button clicked, because that is what we are actually doing. Then I'll close the script tag. So let's see if this works. I'll just refresh this page and I'll click on sign up. So as you can see, we got the pop-up saying sign up button clicked. So as soon as I click OK, that pop-up is gone. So now we can confirm that this isSet function is working. So the isSet would check when the button is clicked or not. So whenever the button is clicked, we have to take these three input values inside different variables in PHP. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll comment out this line because we just typed it to check whether the button is working or not. So now we have to create three variables, $username, and the value inside this variable will come from the $_post variable, which I already told you what exactly it does. Inside the single quotes, we have to take the name which we gave to the input text box, that is username. Similarly, we have to create password and confirm password. So now we have got the three different values. Now we'll also add some validations, that is, we'll make the user to input those values compulsorily, because we don't want blank values. So there is an attribute known as required in HTML5. So if you just type it over here besides the or inside the input tag, you can add a validation of required field. So the HTML page won't let any value to be submitted if you do not actually type in all these values. So let me just show you what exactly is happening. So I'll just refresh this page, and now if I try to submit it, it will say please fill out this field, because we just added the required field attribute. So if I type in over here and these two fields are kept empty, it will pop up and say please fill out this field as well. Again, if I type in over here, it will say please fill out this field. So this is how just by adding a single word we can add a simple basic validation of required field. Okay, so that was about the validations. Let's move ahead with the PHP coding. So now we have the three different values. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to first check whether the password and confirm password match. So that we can do in the if structure. So we'll say if $_password equal to $C password. So if this is true, then we can go ahead and query the database. So if this is true, the next thing we need to do is we need to check in the database whether this username already exists or not. So now comes the part where we need to actually query the database. Now we have already included the dbconfig file. So we already have this entire 2 line of code inside our register.php page. So we have this $_con and we already have connected to the database. So now we need to pass a select query and we need to check the database whether we have this user already existing in the database or not. So the way we do it is we'll create a query string. So we'll say $query is equal to, and inside single quotes we'll say select star from, and our table name is user. So if you want you can check it. So this is our table name, that is user. So select star from user where, and the column name is username. So where username equals to the variable that we just created over here, equal to $username, and this would be inside single quotes. So this has to be double quotes. So always remember, if the outer quotes are double, then inside, if you are passing a variable, they have to be inside single quotes. So what this query will do is, it will check the database if it has the username that we just passed in from the register page. So if it exists, it will return one record, right? So we can check that as follows. So we create another variable, that is query run. So we have to use a user defined function, that is MySQL I underscore query function, and we have to pass in the connection variable and the query. So the connection variable con comes from this file, so we already have declared it over here and we have included it over here, so we can directly use it inside this function. And the query string, we just wrote it over here, which is select star from username, select star from user, where username equal to the variable username. So query run variable will store the result from this function, and this function will return us some values, that is the table or the data from the database. So if there is existing user with the same username, it will return us one record, right? Because it will query the database, and if there is a match found, it will return one record. So in order to check whether it has returned any record or not, we have to again use a if clause, and inside the if clause we have to use a predefined function known as MySQL I underscore num underscore rows, and inside that we have to pass the dollar underscore query run. So what this function MySQL I underscore num underscore rows does is checks how many number of rows are being returned when the query was executed. So if there is a user with the same username, there is one record that is going to be returned, so the rows would be 1. So we can check in the if condition that if the rows or the number of rows is greater than 0, this would mean that there is already a user with the same username. So in that case, we can just show him a pop-up that same user already exists, try another username, right? So I'll say user already exists, try another username. But if the number of rows that the query returned is 0, that means that there is no user with the same username. So in that case, we need to insert these 3 values inside the database. So again, we need to have another query which would say insert into table name, that is user, and the values would be $username inside single quotes because it is a string, and this would be $password again inside single quotes. Now again, we have to create another variable query run and use the predefined function, that is MySQL I underscore query, which would actually execute the query and return some value which would be stored inside the query underscore run variable. So to check whether the query underscore run or this query run successfully, we have to again use another if clause and simply pass $underscore query run. So if it executed successfully, the if part would be executed, and if it doesn't execute successfully, the else part would be executed. So if it doesn't run successfully, we can show an error message. We can say error, and if it runs successfully, we can say user registered. And we can say go to login page to login. So let's see if this entire functionality works, because we've completed the register.php part. So I think the registration page is completely ready. So let's go ahead and save this and try to register a new user. So I'll just click refresh. So there is a warning that is being given to us saying that MySQL query expects at least 2 parameters. So on line number 50, as you can see, the warning was coming on line number 50. So here we have to pass 2 variables. So the first parameter is the connection variable, and the second parameter is the query. So I'll again save this and refresh this page. I think the warning would go. Okay, so the registration page is ready. I'll type in a username. I'll say ABCD. I'll say password as 1234, and I'll say confirm password as 12. So in this case, the password and confirm password doesn't match. So when I click on sign up, it says user registered, go to login page to login. Okay, there's some issue. Okay, the issue was I copied and pasted these 2 things. So the name here is C password. That is the reason why there was an issue over there. Okay, so let me try this again. So we just entered one username and we registered one username, that is ABCD and 1234, as you can see in the database. So let's go ahead and register a new, again the same username. So ABCD, and I'll say 1234. And here again I'll say 1234. So I'm trying to register a new user with the same username. So let's see if our validation mechanism works. And when I click on sign up, it says user already exists, try another username. So what exactly happened over here is, it first went inside this if if clause, and inside the structure it first checked the password and confirm password which was matching. So again it went inside this if block and it checked for the table where the username was ABCD. Since there was already one ABCD registered, it got one record. So 1 is greater than 0. So there is already a user with the same username, and it printed a message that is user already exists, try another username. Now let's try with another username. I'll say PQR, the password is 123 and confirm password is 1. So your password and confirm password doesn't match, so it should give us an error, but it did not give us an error. Why did it not give us an error? Okay, I think I have not, okay, we haven't yet coded the else part. So I'll say else and I'll print an error saying password and confirm password does not match. So if I refresh this page again, it will say password and confirm password does not match because the same data was again posted onto the server. So let's say I'll say PQR password 123 and confirm password is 12. I'll say sign up, it will give me an error, password and confirm password does not match. So this time I'll put all the data properly. I'll say PQR password is 123, confirm password is 123, and now when I click on sign up, it will say user registered, go to login page to login. So what happened here is, since there was no user already with the same username of PQR, we inserted the data in the database, and you can see this by clicking on browse so that this page refreshes, and there you go with the answer, that is PQR. Now this ABCD entered 2 times was by mistake because there was some error before, but if I try to register another ABCD, it will give me an error for sure. So this is the registration part. So now let's go to the login part. So we still have to add a functionality to the back button, and this is simply by adding an anchor tag. So I'll say ahref and we need to go to login.php, and that's it. So if I refresh this again, see, as the multiple data was being posted, that is the reason why it's entering 2 duplicate copies. And I forgot to mention the else part, so that is why it was entering 2 different copies again and again. So because of this, there were duplicate copies being entered, but now it won't be the case. So I added the back functionality. So if I click on back, okay, we have to go to index.php, right? So in the ahref we have to say index.php because that is the name of the login page. Okay, so once I click on back, we go to index.php, and I have to add the register button functionality. So when I click on register, it should go on register.php page. So going to the index.php page, I'll add ahref functionality over here. I'll say register.php. If I refresh this form, or if I refresh this page and if I click on register, it will take me to registration form. If I click on back, it will take me to login form. So now that we have completed the registration form, let me just go ahead and first empty out the database because we had multiple copies that were entered by mistake. So I'll say delete from username and I'll click on go, and all the values will be deleted. Okay, so let's see how the registration works. I'll type in ABC 123 as password, again 123 as confirm password, and click on sign up. User registered, go to login page to login. So again, if I try to log in with or register a same username, it will give me an error, and in the database there would be no multiple copies added. So as you can see, there's only one record of ABC. So the registration page is working completely fine. So let's move on with the login page. Now in the login page, we just need to check in the database where the username and password exist or not. So if I type in ABC and 123, it should log in and it should send me on the home page, and where I would see a message of welcome ABC. So the ABC message has to be, or ABC value has to be passed from this page to the home page. So let's go ahead and try to code this functionality. So in the index.php, the first thing that we need to do is we need to include the config file because we need to establish a connection with the database. So I'll say require dbconfig/config.php. So we included this file, that is we included these 2 values, the connection object and the database selection part. Now below this form tag, we'll again type in the PHP script, and we still have to give names to these input tags. So I'll give the names over here. I'll give the name as username. Again, I'll give the name as password. And for the submit button, I'll give the name as login. So in the PHP script, I'll first check if the button is clicked or not. So if is set $_post, which is the global variable, and we have to check for the submit button, that is the login button. So the name of that button is login. So if it is clicked, then execute this, else do nothing. So the if block would be executed when the button is clicked. Now inside this, we have to first query the database and check whether the username and password exist. So the query would be select star from table name, which is user, where username equal to, so we first have to create the two variables as well. So we'll create $username, which would have the value from the $_post variable, and the name of the post variable is username. Similarly, for the password, we'll create a variable. The value for that variable will come from the post variable, which has the name as password. So the query would be select star from user, where username is equal to $username, and this would be in single quotes, whereas the outer quotes would be double quotes. And we have to check for password as well. So password equals to $_password. So this $_password is the variable that we just created, which has the value from the text box named password, and same for the username. So we'll create another variable query run, which will hold the result from the predefined function MySQLi underscore query, and the first parameter is the connection object, and the second parameter is the query itself. So we also have to add basic validation of required field. So we'll say required for the two text boxes, and now we have to check whether there is any row that is returned from the query. So if there is even a single record that is returned, that means that there is a record in the database with the same username and password. So we have to check for if MySQL underscore num underscore rows. So we have to use the inbuilt function MySQL underscore num underscore rows, and we have to pass the result, that is query run, and we have to check if it is greater than 0. That is, if the number of rows returned when we execute this query is greater than 0, that means there exists a certain value inside the database which has the same username and password. So this means that it is a valid username and password, else it is invalid. So if it is invalid, we can directly pop up an alert message saying that it is invalid message or invalid user. So I'll say alert invalid credentials. And if it is a valid user, then what we have to do is we have to store the username and password in a session variable, because we have to access it in the next home page. So the way we do that is we create a $_session variable, and name of that variable is username, and this $_session is again a global variable which is inbuilt in PHP, and we can use it to create a session variable which would last throughout the session of the browser. So until and unless your browser is open, this variable value can be accessed in all the pages. So I just created a session variable named username, and I'll put the $username that we got from the text box. Because it is a valid username and we checked it in this if condition, I'll put it in the username session. And similarly for the password, we actually don't need password, so we'll just keep this. And now we have to transfer this to the home page. So the function that is to be used is header function, and inside the header we have to just give the location, and the location is homepage.php. So this is basic functionality of the login page, and let's see if this works. So we already have one data entry, that is username is ABC and password is 123. So if I click on login, it should directly transfer me to the home page. Let me just first refresh this. I'll say ABC and 123. I'll say login, and there you go. It transferred me to the home page, and you can see a screen where it is saying welcome user. Now we want to change this user and we want to print the username, that is it has to print welcome ABC. And for the logout function, we have to again transfer it to the login page, or transfer the user to the login page. So let's see how that can be done. So let's first go to the login page. So in order to access the session variables on all pages, we have to first call a function, that is inbuilt function known as session_start. So this we have to call at the very starting of the PHP file, so that the session is started at the very beginning, and we have to include this inside the home page as well. So inside the home page, I can directly write PHP script over here, and I can print echo $_session, and the session variable name was username. So instead of this user, which is hard coded, I can print a PHP code dynamically, and I can print the username dynamically. So let's see if this works. So first of all, let's try invalid username. So I'll say ABCD and password a something random, and I'll click on login, and as you can see we have invalid credentials. So now I'll type in the correct username but wrong password, and I'll click login, and again it says invalid credentials. Now let's log in with the proper username and password, and when I click on login, it says welcome ABC. So as you can see, the ABC value was in the session, and I could retrieve it using the session variable. Now what I want to do is I want to clear the session. So in order to clear the session, we have to type in session_destroy, and this function would clear all the session variables, and then we can redirect it, or redirect the page using the header function which we already previously used, and we can give the location as index.php. And this session.destroy is to be called only when the submit button is clicked. In this case, the submit button is the logout button, and we have to give it a name. So I'll give it a name of logout, and in the PHP script I'll say if is set $_post. The reason why we are using $_post is because in the form the data is transferred in the method using post. If this was get, we would have written $_get, and in the square brackets I'll put the name of the input tag or the button, that is logout. So when the button is clicked, only then we need to call this two functions, that is the session_destroy, and we have to transfer the page to the index.php page. Otherwise we don't have to call these two functions. So these two line of code will execute only when you actually click on the logout button. So let's again log in, ABC and 123. It says welcome user, and when I click on logout, the session is cleared. And if you want to verify this, you can go to register.php by typing in the address, and you can go to the homepage.php by typing in the address, and you can see that there is a notice that is undefined index username. So since the session is already cleared, there is no value in the session variable named username. That is the reason why we are getting this notice. So now we have completed all the functionalities of the login, register and home page. So let's just try it out once again for the last time. So we'll click on register, we'll create a new user as PQR, we'll type in the password as 123, again confirm password 123. Since all the values are correct, we'll click on sign up, and it will create a new user. Now this value will be reflected in the database, and you can click browse again to see that a new user, that is PQR, is being added. Now we'll get back to the login form by clicking on back button. We'll type in PQR, we'll type in the correct password 123, we click on the login button, and there you go with the output on the home page where it says welcome PQR. You click on the logout button, the session is cleared, and you are redirected back to the login page. So this is the basic functionality of a login and registration page using HTML, CSS and PHP and MySQL database. So I hope you understood the programming part. It is pretty simple, and you can use this in your projects to create a basic login and registration mechanism, and you can use the same queries to actually get information about other values as well. So that's it for this video tutorial, and I hope you understood the entire video tutorial, and I hope you can actually design your own login page. And if you have any queries, you can always put them in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Peace.